Welcome
Ooh,
back to the podcast. We have a very unusual setup this time around. We are promoting not one, but two Kickstarters at the same time. We have returning Michael Katz. We have Keith Champagne. We have Rich Stahnke, who is the colorist involved. Rich, you are the first time guest around. I want to know your comic book origin
yes.
story and how you got into comic books and became a lifelong fan. It's always my first question.
Okay.
I threw him
I
for a loop.
God, I'm 54 years old, and I've been reading comics since I was at least four.
Nerd.
I remember buying, or me not buying, but my parents buying me and my older brother comics back in the 70s, the spinner rack at the convenience store, and my mom reading comics to us. And I remember walking around, and I give credit to comics for teaching me to read, or at least helping me learn to read. By the time I started kindergarten, I could read, and I credit comics with that, because I think that the marriage of the pictures and the words helped me put everything together. And I remember walking around. I have a specific memory of walking around with this one Western Marvel comic that had no cover on it. It was beat all to hell, but that was what I considered my first comic book. And I remember it was dated 1974. So I know I was 4 years old at the time, but I loved the artwork of it, the attraction of the superheroes. And back in the 70s, of course, that was the age where you had a Spider-Man TV show, and the Incredible Hulk was on TV, and Batman, the 60s Batman show was in reruns. So we watched those. So I was all about superheroes, and I always liked to draw. So the artwork and the dynamic and action-packed stories attracted me to comics, and I just never really gave up on them. I stopped buying here and there, like in college for a year or so. I stopped buying comics, but for the most part, next year will be 50 straight years of me buying comics, and I've always loved to draw, and just have always loved comics.
So you didn't even have to stay your age. All you had to do was mention spinner rack, and that carbon dates you right away.
Yeah, that dates me. Yeah,
That's dates you.
The convenience store hunt for that latest issue in case you missed it.
And convenience stores, people don't realize that you had to go hunt and peck through all these stores to try to find your comic book, because you never knew when it was going to be there. And comic books back then were frowned upon. Nobody let you read comic books. Teachers hated it, but that's beside the point. Michael, I want to go right to you. Tell the fans a little bit about yourself and why you decided to get into comic books as a writer and a publisher.
I decided to get into comic books as a get-rich-quick scheme.
How'd that go for you?
Just didn't work out like I expected.
So that's why you kept your day job.
Yeah, I'm a lawyer by day, writer on the side. Started my own publishing company in 2002, Strider Nolan, and I started creating comics about 4 years ago at this point. I released my books through Kickstarter because the direct market is so flooded and so difficult right now.
And wonky.
Yeah. But I do have some irons in the fire about some future possibilities. So, keep your fingers crossed. Meanwhile, I mean, I've worked with talent like Ron Mars, Darryl Banks, Kevin McGuire, and some guy named Keith Champagne.
Yeah. Who's Keith Champagne? Who's Keith Keith? Who are you? Tell people who you are, what you've done, a little bit about
Is
you.
that a segue or what?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Well, I mean, I'm sort of a mystery wrapped in a legend, encased in a puzzle box.
Nice.
But I'm a lifelong comic book fan. I think when I was about 3, I fell in love with comics. And that was always my dream job, was to grow up and become a comic book artist. So when I was 22, 23, I broke into the industry. And now 30 years later, I've wasted my entire adult life, working for DC and Marvel and Dark Horse and
you were nominated for a few awards along the way. Is that true?
Yeah, a couple here and there, but that doesn't really mean anything. It's just whatever.
If you won them, if you would have won a few, then they might mean a little bit more, possibly. Maybe,
I don't think they do.
You don't see, like that.
I think if it doesn't get you more work, it doesn't really matter. If it doesn't get you paid faster, it doesn't really matter. So I don't think like winning, what are the Ringo Award or maybe an Eisner Award would help. Really does much. I think it's just, it feels good, and the recognition is nice to be nominated, but it doesn't matter.
This
I heard
Delighted
you're
about
up for a Grammy as a karaoke DJ.
I am probably the world's greatest karaoke singer, and if we ever go out, I will karaoke the fuck out of all you guys.
Now, this is a very special podcast because this is the first time that Keith and Colorist Rich are meeting face to face for the first time. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Keith?
no, it's great. I've been working with Rich for a couple of years now on different things. He's a fantastic color artist and also a really good storyteller.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, go on.
Oh, that's sweet.
Well,
That's
so,
so sweet.
yeah, go on, Keith. Go on. Let's tell us some more. Make
But
Rich
aside
feel
from
good.
Yeah, tell us more, Keith. Tell us more.
Yeah, tell us, make him feel good.
no, well, but the most important thing to me, and I made this comment in several interviews in the past couple of years, is I've just reached a point in my career where I don't want to work with assholes anymore. And Rich is a super nice guy. I like him enormously. I mean, we never met in person, but he's very fun to banter back and forth with. He's a hard worker. He does a great job. So he checks all the boxes. And I think he has a cool story too, because he didn't really break into comics until he retired from his career. So he's like comics' oldest rookie. Finally, finally living out his dream job, all these years later. So I think that's kind of amazing, and I love when I can give him work and kind of help him on his way.
Rich, tell us about that. How did you become the world's youngest rookie, and why, of all things, did you decide to be a colorist of all things?
Oh God. Well, I've been tinkering with making comics for close to 20 years. I do produce my own comic. Can you see that?
Drunken Monkey.
Drunken Monkey. Yeah. So I mean, that issue there is from 2004.
That's sometimes me on a Saturday night, I have to admit.
So I've been making comics and playing around with it for quite a while, but not, I've got still imposter syndrome because I'm not a pro. I mean, I get paid now to do some comics work here and there, but I'm not paying my bills with it. But what Keith was talking about being the oldest rookie was I retired from being a police officer a couple of years ago.
Great. Thank you for serving the community and where you're at. I really do respect people who do that type of thing. Thank you.
But I really enjoy retirement a lot better than I did the job. So when I was working, the comics thing was just something I did to amuse myself here and there. So I put out 5 issues or so of the book in the early to mid 2000s, and then like every 2 years I'd roll out another issue when I got around to just knocking it out. And I do everything. I write it, I draw it, do the colors or grayscaling for the black and white issues, and I've even lettered the last few issues of it. And it's out of necessity. It's I had to teach myself to use Photoshop because there was nobody else around to do it. So I fell into this coloring thing that I've been doing the most work on for the past year and a half or so by accident, and primarily Keith has become my patron for it. There's a comic artist that lives here in the Charlotte area where I live that I got to know from the local shows called Andy Smith, and Andy was working with Keith on a story that eventually ran in heavy metal. And I went by Andy's house completely unrelated to pick up some books he was giving me for a charity donation. And we were hanging out in the studio, and he was telling me what his projects were going on. And he mentioned that he was having trouble with a colorist he had been using that was in, I think, India. It was somewhere overseas, and he just lost contact with this guy. Didn't know if he was dead, alive, if he didn't want to work with him, and he didn't know what was going on. But he needed something like 40 or 60 pages done in like 2-3 weeks. And there's no way in hell I was going to be able to produce that kind of work. So I was still working at the time. But then he mentioned he had like a 12-pager with Keith that needed colors too. And so I said, well, I can probably help you out with that. Do you need that within a couple of weeks or 3 weeks or something? That was reasonable for me to do in my spare time and knock out. And Andy, God bless him, was kind of like, yeah, I don't really know because I've never seen your color work. And he was a little dismissive of me at first, but I said, well, give me a couple of pages. I'll do it as a tryout. And if you guys like it, show it to the writer. If you like it, I'll do it for whatever you were going to pay the other dude in India. So I did a couple of tryout pages. Andy, I guess, showed it to Keith. Keith liked them. So I got to do those story installments that ran in heavy metal. And that was my first professional paid work that actually went into a publication that was available in stores and widely distributed. I've contributed as a writer and artist for small press stuff here and there over the past few years, but that was my first pro work. And that led to Keith, God bless him, has kept throwing me bones, and it's led to one thing after another with him.
Very impressive story. Thank you for sharing that. That
Yeah,
was
I
very
fell into
cool.
it by accident, basically.
Now, Michael, when you reached out to me, you said, I'm bringing Keith on this. Why did you decide to gang up on me and bring up Keith with 2 Kickstarters and bring this all together? And how did you meet Keith in the first place? Why did you decide this type of format between the 3 of you?
Well, we knew we were running Kickstarters at the same time. So we decided, we tried, helping each other out, cross promoting each other, ride each other's coattails. So
It's the other way
just,
around. You're riding Keith's coattail. Let's get the story straight here.
No, actually, Mike's campaign is beating mine right now. He's
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
So yeah, so we're just we're just trying to be an informal team on for Kickstarter, I guess. So I'm trying to I'm the one responsible for setting up podcasts. So I'm trying to bring Keith along every time I I can get one done.
And Keith is welcomed anytime you're along. He's welcomed at any time. Yes.
And we've known each other for a few years. We connected on one of my books, Golden Years, where he inked 3 of the 5 issues, and we became buds. And he's also done lettering for all of my books, and he's the editor for my latest book, Metalhead.
Tell us a little bit about Metalhead. It's a little bit different than what you've done with your past projects. And is it connected to your universes that you got going on with your other projects?
It does not share the same universe. So far, all my projects stand alone. Like Riot Art takes place in the future, Golden Years in the present. My next book, Horror Show, takes place in the 70s. Metalhead can take place at any time, really. It's just a fast-paced, action-packed sci-fi book about an alien invasion. It's got some nudity in it, so it's different in that respect. But otherwise, I think it's the same writing style I usually do, which is I focus on characters first, and then hopefully just entertain the hell out of the reader.
Keith, what's your Kickstarter about this time around? You've got a couple things going on with that one.
Yeah, so what I'm running right now is called the New Pain 2-in-1. New Pain is the name of my publishing company. The first part of the 2-in-1 is a book called NPC Jump. NPC stands for New Pain Challenge, which I'll get into in a second. But the genesis of Jump is basically that I like writing first issues. I find it a challenge. I like to get all the puzzle pieces, onto the page in a way that doesn't feel expository, especially. I got to thinking to myself, I want to do a series that somehow it's all first issues. And that's what the Jump is going to end up being, is that every issue is going to be, issue 2 will be issue number 2, but it's also approached very much like a first issue, and the way that issue number 1 ends, it doesn't end on a cliffhanger. It ends in a brick wall. There's no way for the story to keep going. And the challenge part of this book is that throughout the book, there are clues, there are little hints as to the different plot elements that I'm going to use to keep the story moving into the second issue. But when the second issue rolls around, I'm sorry, let me just finish that thought. So the challenge part is, the backers of this book, I want them to guess. There's an email address that's set up, it's going to be printed in the book. And after they read the book, I want people to take their best guess as to how we're going to keep going with this thing, because there's no possible way to continue telling the story, but there is. And then whoever gets closest to it becomes a character in the second issue.
Very innovative. Very cool.
It's just a way to, I don't know if it's a marketing hook or what, but a way to try to make it more interactive. for the reader and just have fun with me. But anyway, when the second issue does come around, it's all the same characters are going to be in the second issue, but it's all remixed and scrambled in a way where it's another first issue, like, where it's like, whoa, this is like the same thing, but completely different than it was. And it'll make sense when people read the second issue. I finalized the script for the second issue like last week, and I'm really happy with it. I'm really happy with the way the story picks up. And I'm excited to kind of get this out. So it's going to be 4 issues, and every issue is going to end in a way that there's no fucking way this book can keep going. And then every issue, there is a way, and if people can figure it out, they're going to be part of the story.
And don't you have another comic that goes in the back end of that? Is it a
Yeah,
pinup?
I do actually. So the other part of this campaign, the second part of the 2-in-1, is a book called Uncovered. And basically, over the past 2 years that New Pain's been publishing books, I've had a lot of my big 2 artist friends come in, and they've done variant covers for us. And so I'm just doing a book that collects all this amazing artwork, much of it colored by Rich, actually. And it's just a way, for the art lover to just have some really cool shit in their collection to flip through if they're bored or whatever people do with these pinup books.
Rich, do
Yes.
you actually have any people that you actually look at for a colorist, or do you have any like mentors or something? Because one of my favorite things, I always call him the other Stan, was Stan Goldberg, who worked in the 60s, and he was involved with a lot of the coloring for Spider-Man, Fantastic Four. He was an artist for Millie the Model. As a colorist, do you have any like mentors or things you look at, or how do you approach all that?
I don't know how to say this, but it's going to sound vain. So I'm going to explain
No,
why
go
I'm gonna say
ahead.
I don't. And it's not because I don't have room to improve, and it's not because I don't want to improve or don't want to hear criticism or tips. Is I'm at a point where I don't buy a lot of current comics. I do see stuff online, and I do find myself now paying a lot more attention to the colors, and I just kind of study. And if I see an image that looks good, I study it. I don't necessarily go and seek out who did the work, but I study the picture and look for, I start looking for, I think they used a filter on this. I think they did a color hold here. That's a cool texture they used or whatever it is. But I don't really pay a lot of attention necessarily even to creator credits anymore. And I guess that's bad considering I do love comics, but I generally buy older comics when I do spend money. I collect older issues. So current stuff, I just don't pay a lot of attention to, even like I'm a huge Daredevil fan, so I still buy Daredevil. I couldn't tell you who the artist is for Daredevil volume 27 or whatever it is they're on now. I don't really even pay attention much to it. Unless it's somebody who I was already familiar with, like Ron Garney, when he was on the book a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. I knew Ron Garney's name, and I knew his work already from years back. So I knew that, but I just don't pay a lot of attention to the credits anymore. And coloring today is just so vastly different than it was in
Even
the
10
early
years
90s.
ago, yeah.
Yeah. And I will say that color work has just vastly improved so drastically, and the implementation of Photoshop has elevated the artwork in comics from, drastically. There's always been great artists who do, good work, and there's, your master draftsman like a John Buscema or whoever, but the color work can take a mediocre artist like me and elevate it and just make it look good. And I know within the pros, and Keith can weigh in or wherever, you can see crap artwork that looks pretty good because it's been very well colored, and you can really, elevate a book's overall artwork and look to it. So I can't name anybody because I just don't pay attention to it. So
Fair
hopefully that, like I said, I don't want to come around like an ass
No,
on
you
the front
did.
end by saying no, but it's just because I just don't pay attention to the names.
Michael, who are some of the contributors to your current project, and what are some of the tier structures involved?
Well, as for who's involved, I mentioned Keith. My artist is a guy named Bruno Abdias. A few months ago, he won the Top Cow Comics talent search for 2023. And just this week, I found out he's going to be drawing Cyborg for DC Comics.
Impressive.
So I got Neto Diaz to do art for Golden Years, and he went on to work for Marvel Comics. So apparently, I can pick out pretty good talent, and maybe predict who's going to strike it big.
I got a question for
Man,
you,
maybe this
Michael.
is my shot. Maybe working with Mike is going to bring me up to the big time.
Michael,
Everybody but me.
we always talk about your ethnicity, and I'm curious, do Jews believe they have a soul? Well, because I'm just wondering, because I'm wondering if he's like sold your soul to get all these great creators. He just has this Rolodex of creators. I'm like, how the heck does a lawyer out in Pennsylvania know Ron Mars, Keith Champagne, Daryl Banks, and now this cyborg artist? And I'm like, really, seriously? I'm like,
I do have a soul,
okay.
but if you saw my checkbook, you know I didn't sell it.
Okay. All right. What about so what else do you have some tier structures for your campaign, Michael?
I have a ton of tiers.
Talk a few things.
Yeah, people actually keep asking me to add stuff that I'd forgotten to put as tiers or add-ons or whatever. So you got the digital, you got the hard copy, you got not safe for work variant covers, you got pinups, you got original art commissions by Bruno Diaz plus Fred Bennis and Daryl Banks, who are my usual coworkers. As add-ons, you get my prior comics, including Metalhead #1, the Riot Earp collection, and the Golden Years trade.
Impressive. That's very cool. What about you, Keith? What are your tier structure looking like?
I mean, we have the typical digital / physical book combos. Excuse me. Also, remarks versions of the book. I'm doing remarks, limited number of remarks. We have naming rights. You can be, the character will carry your name. There's also a female character that you can be named after if you pick up that tier. A lot of original art, the cover art from Pat O'Leaf and Paul Pelletier, Freddie Williams III. I did a cover too, so that's the cheapest one on there. Someone must have grabbed mine. A lot of t-shirts, New Pain t-shirts. As a stretch goal, Rich has done a cover for the book in homage to Spider-Man 300, Amazing Spider-Man 300 with the jump, which we're hoping to unlock when we get that far. So, there's a lot of fun stuff there. And also, the back list of books that we've done is also available. Daybreak and Cuda, which is the one that Rich was talking about before. The Switch, all the stuff that I've published is up there too that you can grab. And then next week, I'm going to add a couple of things that I shouldn't add, like stuff that I sell at conventions. I have an issue of Green Lantern that I had put together for DC, and they never published it. So I have the files, and I've been publishing my own bootleg version for a few years now. And so I'm gonna add that as kind of a down low add-on, and also I have an issue of Superman by Rick Leonardi that I wrote that I'm going to add up there too. Just a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Here's something that you guys are never going to get to read otherwise. So if you want to add it to your campaign, I'll get a couple of copies out to you.
Keith, you're also a graduate from the Cooper School. You graduated back in 1994. And that was before the internet and all these changes in the comic industry. Do you think going to an art school is still viable today for people that's starting off, or is it kind of different?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I'm not an expert.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. I mean, I think anything that you can learn in an art school, you probably can train yourself through a YouTube video or, an online tutorial somehow these days. But I think what you can get from an art school is the camaraderie of your students, the one-on-one instruction that you get. Like, the Cooper School, for example, is all taught by professional artists. So you're not going to be able to take advantage of their experience, their skills, their critiques, their connections when the time comes.
When you were there, when you were there, what were some of the people that you learned from? Do you remember that far back?
It's just hard. No, I mean, some of my favorite people in the world were my instructors at the time. You know, the ones that comic book fans would know. I mean, Joe Kubert obviously was, the marquee name of the school. But also there was an inker, Tex Blaisdell, who did a lot of work for DC in the 60s and 70s.
Didn't he
He
also
was
do a lot of Westerns?
Yep. And
See,
he
I
was a
did my
grizzled,
homework.
yeah, he was a grizzled old veteran. When I got to know him, took no shit from anybody.
Speaking of taking no shit from anybody, when you get done talking about Ted, tell that Joe Kubert story that Rich doesn't know that I love, and but go ahead. Make sure you get that
Oh,
into
sure.
you.
Yeah.
No, so
No.
there was Tex, there was Hi Eisman, who did a strip called The Katz and Jimmer Kids for years, did the Popeye newspaper strip for years and years. Still alive. He's like 100 years old now. He just retired from
really?
Popeye. Yeah.
Okay.
Kim DeMulder, who was inking John Byrne's She-Hulk graphic novel when I met him in the school.
That's a good
There's
graphic
more.
novel, by the way. I like that one, The She-Hulk. That was a
Yeah.
really good graphic
I got
novel.
that, yeah.
A guy named Lyman Dally was my life drawing teacher. A great guy, really understood anatomy. He would draw a strip of the bodybuilding magazines, and he always had a great story about something or other. That's the kind of stuff you can't get online.
What was Joe
And those
Kubert
are-
like? I mean, he was there and alive at the time, but what was he like? I'm just curious.
I mean, there are a lot of people that knew Joe better than I did. I knew Andy and Adam better than I did Joe. But I can't think of a bad word to say about the guy. He was just very salt of the earth, very down to earth, just a nice guy, had a good sense of humor, and just a brilliant artist, but not pretentious at all. Like very, easygoing about his, man with talent.
You
which
had
is,
an arm wrestling contest with that man. How did that happen? How did that come about? And what exactly happened? And he wasn't a young buck at the time. Am I correct?
No, okay, I'll tell the story. You're gonna just
I've got him hook, line, and sinker. I got him to tell the story again. Go ahead.
So when I was in the third year of the Cuba school, I was 23 years old at the time, kind of a young buck, and we were kind of bored in class one day, and so I arm wrestled my class, like one at a time. I had, I think, 12 or 13 other kids in my class. I just arm wrestled everybody, and I beat everybody one at a time. So, Andy certainly advised me not to do this, but I was like, I'm going to challenge Joe. Joe had a handshake that would crush a grizzly bear if he shook the bear's hand. He was a strong, strong fella, in the 70s at the time.
In the 70s.
So, yeah,
That's
he was
the
in the
best part.
70s, and I was, in my early 20s, and we locked up. And as soon as I locked hands with Joe, I regretted this decision to challenge Joe to arm wrestle, because I could just feel like the strength in his arm.
As your fingers
And
crushed.
Oh, it was, I think I tinkled a little in my pants at that moment. And
How long
I
did
mean,
it last? How long did it last? Did you at least give him a fighting effort?
No, I tried, but he just crushed me. Maybe a half a second later, I was humiliated. I got beat by my grandfather, basically.
Basically got beat
in
by
arm wrestling.
So 23-year-old Keith Champagne got his clock clean by a 70-something-year-old Joe Kubert. Is that pretty much it in a nutshell, Keith? Is that it?
In a nutshell, but it's, one of my favorite memories now of looking back. We just lost Rich somehow.
He'll come back.
And there's
He's there.
No, there he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, one of my favorite memories. I also remember, not
Could
that
you tell the
anyone cares
whole
about this.
Cubic story over again about arm wrestling? I think I missed the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'll text it to you. There's also,
Okay.
when I was in my first year at the Cuba school, we had one of my instructors, a guy named Ern Hazen, who he was involved in the creation of Green Lantern back in the early days, the 40s and 50s or whenever that was. And he did a newspaper strip called Dondi for years. And I had the opportunity to pencil some pages professionally, but didn't have a lot of time to do it between homework and I had a job outside of school. And Erwin had he was my narrative art teacher. And so I had an assignment for him to do, 3 narrative art pages. So I said to him, Erwin, what if I was to just, instead of drawing your assignment, what if could I do 3 pages of this and then use it as your assignment? It's still 3 pages of storytelling. And he said, no. And I was like, so we got in kind of an argument about it, myself and this tiny little man who was like in his late 70s at the time. And I was like, okay, Erwin, that's fine. I'm just going to shit out your homework. And I'll put my effort into this other stuff. And he got so offended by that. He's like, how's that supposed to make me feel when I see you? I'm going to be, oh, this little shithead, come on, shut up my homework, you fucking shithead. And I felt so bad about that argument at the time. Like, I can't believe like I'm fighting with Erwin Hazen. But now it's one of my favorite memories of the world. It's like arguing with Erwin back in the day. And the same with Joe. It's one of my favorite things, like getting crushed by Joe.
I love that story. That's one of the story I tell everybody that comes on. It's the Joe story, Joe Cooper story with you. I tell people, and then the Michael Katz story that I tell everybody that Michael knows about. Michael, you have were you done, Keith? By the way, I'm sorry. Were you done?
Oh yeah, no, I've talked plenty. I'll show up the rest of the time.
Okay. Because we got to go back to Michael, then we got to go down to Rich before Rich falls asleep on us. So we're gonna go back to Michael first.
No, I'm eating this up because I've met Erwin when he was alive, and he was the nicest man. So the fact that you made him curse and get all pissed off at you was fantastic. Because I love talking to him. He was such a gentleman. He'd show up to Heroes Con wearing a suit and tie, and he was always on the floor before everybody. You know, he was a consummate professional. You know, it'd be like 30, 45 minutes before they open the doors. Everybody else is barely showed up or at their table or anything, and he was there set up and ready to go. And he was just the sweetest dude to talk to.
No, he was. I mean, I'm the dickhead in that story. Like, it's not Erwin. I was the problem, not him.
You're not a dickhead. Well, okay, maybe back then. I don't know. Michael, this time around, you actually have some nudity in your project. I was surprised about that because I just didn't think you would do nudity. And this is also going to dovetail to Keith, because I believe his other book also has some nudity in the pinups. Both of you, how did you guys decide to make nudity? And I'm sure it's more for a reason than just to be smutty, like the old time type stuff. So what was the rationale behind including nudity in both your projects? I'm just curious. Michael first.
Yeah, for me, Metalhead is a bit of an homage to Heavy Metal magazine. So it's got nudity and it's got some bad words in it. I was exposed
shocked,
to the
Michael,
Heavy Metal movie.
I was shocked, Michael, because I mean, I think if you just, this conservative lawyer, and next thing you know, he's got boobies right there, and I'm like, geez, Michael, you surprised me. But no, go on.
Yeah, I saw the Heavy Metal movie at an early age. I was like 11 or 12, and I had a friend who had access to movies like that and Animal House and adult stuff like that. And I mean, that wasn't easy to find that stuff back when there was no cable. Like we're talking like 40 something years ago. So I always loved Heavy Metal magazine and the adult stuff to it. And the story, it just had just some adult situations that I thought fit with the story. Plus I do hope that the not safe for work stuff brings in some people that might not otherwise pick up the book.
Keith, what about you? How do you approach nudity in your projects?
I mean, I'm not a prude by any means. We've done some nude covers for my Daybreak project, and that was really a case of several of the backers messaged me, and I even had lunch with one that lives here in Connecticut. He reached out, was like, "Hey, I don't live that far. Can we go a bite?" So I was like, "Sure. I'm a man of the people." And they asked me, like, "Have you ever thought about doing a nude cover? Like, I think people would like to buy nude covers from you." And I was kind of on the fence about it. But we gave it a try with number 2, and my partner Tom Nguyen loves drawing sexy women and naked stuff like that, so it's right up his alley. So we gave it a shot, and it did pretty well, and so we did one for the 3rd issue, and now those are being reprinted in the the Uncovered book, and Tom's doing a new one for the Uncovered book also, which hasn't been announced yet, so I guess I just did.
There you go.
To me, I could really give a shit. It's just, if people want to spend money to buy that stuff, I'm happy to put it out there. If it makes a project more successful.
I was just curious is all. I mean, I don't care about either. I'm not a prude. I was just curious that you both made those things. Rich, as a colorist, what do you try to bring to a project? Whether it's, I mean, what are you trying to do when you, as a colorist? I mean, do you look for a certain palette? Do you try to make things stand out? Even I'm sure you've done some nude stuff before where you color. I mean, how do you decide on your coloring of a comic book?
Well, I think Keith at one point said something. I was really fond of the color purple, and and he's not. And I know that in the past year or so,
You
purples
added
and
more.
oranges.
You
are
added more purple just to
It
piss
was
off.
a great book and movie, so surprised Keith doesn't
Yeah,
like
not that kind of purple, not the whoopie thing, but you know,
Oh,
the
okay.
actual, you know, chromatic color purple. But I think with my coloring, I work hard and not smart, and I probably spend more time rendering backgrounds and environments than I should. Instead of, you know, I guess a classically trained artist, which I'm not, would probably say, no, you need to be focusing on, you know, the key point of the panel, the picture, you know,
And we lost them.
highlight
There we
the
go.
focal point, just draw attention to that. Ignore other stuff. But I find myself spending a lot of time doing backgrounds and rendering the environment because I think it's, for me as a reader, I want the character to be grounded in whatever it is that they're doing.
Because a lot of times, and I
on my time doing.
A lot of times, the writer and the artist get all the credit, and we lost Rich again. Poor Rich. Rich will be back.
He's back.
There's Rich. Hi, Rich.
Yeah, I am. Do I need to say all that all over again?
No, you're good. We got it pretty much. It'll fly. But no, what I was saying is that a lot of times the writers and the artists get all the credit, and the colorist or the inker or even the letterer don't get recognized for their contributions to the comic book, because I believe that, you know, their input is equally as important. Not that they're more important than a writer, but they get colored over. Actually, they just kind of get, you know, nobody. So I was excited to have a colorist on here to explain, hey, a colorist is actually extremely important, you know, as part of a comic book, you know, just as much as an inker or a letterer.
I don't even call myself a colorist, so you're being very generous.
Hey, that's what they told me. I'm just doing the talking points. I'm just the patsy around here. I'm just trying to run this circus right now. They told me you're a colorist, so that's an honor. So you should take the colors part. But no, I'm glad that you were able to talk about colors, because a lot of fans don't understand the importance of colorists and what they do. They just read the comic book like you do. They don't pay attention to the credits. I get that. That's understandable. Like, that's fine. Keith and Michael, what type of fans would back your Kickstarter? What type of fan would enjoy your Kickstarter campaigns? Keith, go first. I've been picking on Michael, and I want you to go first this time.
Well, I think, you know, it's a superhero book. Jump is, you know, it's got the dressings of a superhero book. So I think people that are into big two superheroes, which I've certainly created plenty of those books, would also like this one. I think that people that are just into, you know, good looking art would like these books.
They're very good
I think
books.
I think that people that are into, you know, a little bit of mystery would dig these books. You know, sci-fi. I try to appeal to everybody.
What about you,
Can I
Michael?
chime in real quick? Hey, as a reader with Jump, I
Yes.
was a big fan. I was a big fan of the Invincible series from Kirkman when it was out. Straightforward superhero action with comedic elements, some goofy villains here and there, but that are actually dangerous, and people, you know, fight, get hurt. So if you were a fan of the Invincible series, I think people will like Jump.
There we go.
Oh, thanks. I didn't think of that.
That was very nice. That was pretty good. You make sure you
Yeah,
give them
thank
some
you.
extra, you know, kudos for that. Michael, what about you? What type of person would enjoy your Kickstarter? Not that you need it, because you run so many successful Kickstarters. I don't even know why you go on podcasts. Your stuff just, you know, as we were talking, it's like, you know, we got multi-talented Keith here, and lawyer Michael's out selling his Kickstarter than poor Keith here. So Michael, what type of fan would enjoy you?
me.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, I think superhero books are tougher to sell on Kickstarter. You know, my Riot Earp and, you know, and Metalhead have done better. They're sci-fi books. I mean, look, they're good comics. They're good for fans of heavy metal. Good for fans of not safe for work content. Fans of great art. Because you know, Bruno Ideas deserves to be big. You know, he deserves to have a big following. So hopefully, you know, people should get in on the ground floor of his career and start picking up this book now.
There you go. Michael and then Keith, this is something I always ask people. Michael, what advice would you give to somebody that's actually thinking about starting their own Kickstarter campaign? Because you've done multiple ones that have been successful. What would be your advice?
I would say start small. Don't spend too much money because it's so hard to make money on Kickstarter. Even if you complete a successful campaign, you may wind up losing money. You know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So you need to take the long view and slowly build up an audience if you expect to eventually make money. But I mean, there are comic creators on Kickstarter who are making six figures and then some on their books. So it is possible. And that's, what I'm shooting for one day.
Excuse me, Keith, same question with you, but you're also a professional creator. Does that make a difference with your Kickstarter? Like Steve Rude does stuff, Mike Barron does GoFundMe stuff. Does somebody that's more name brand, does that make a difference in your Kickstarter campaigns and making one to be successful?
So I have this internal debate with myself, actually, like, because all my campaigns are run under the New Pain banner. And I wonder sometimes if I did them under my own name, if I would draw more attention. I mean, I'm not a huge name in the comic book industry. I'm more of a journeyman that's been around forever. But I do have name recognition that maybe New Pain doesn't. I don't know. As far as what advice I would give somebody, I always tell people, get the book done first before you launch the campaign, because you don't want to mess up the fulfillment. You want to fulfill on time, and you want to build trust with your backers, so that every time they back your campaign, they know, they're going to get their book in a relatively short amount of time, and they can count on it. And hopefully, if you do that enough times, you grow.
Here comes the invisible man. The invisible
Oh.
man is back again. So there we go. Hi, Rich. Back. Poor Rich is having poor internet problems there. Anyways, go on. Sorry,
It's
Keith.
my daughter probably watching Netflix and screwing everything up downstairs.
You're watching Stranger Things.
Oh boy, my favorite.
So go on. I'm sorry.
That's a segue for you, Keith.
Yeah, no. Well, hey, go spend some money on Dark Horse. I lost my train of thought. I think what I was going to say was I would really enjoy, career-wise, if I could stop doing work for DC and Marvel or Dark Horse or whatever, and just focus on this New Pain stuff and these Kickstarter books and build it out into something real. And if I could just get to 500 or 600 backers consistently every campaign, I think I could make a full-time living at this and pay people pretty well to help me make these books. So, knock on wood, it grows and becomes that. And if it doesn't, then I'll go back to, doing Green Lantern for the 47th time of my life. Worst problems to have.
Yeah, worst things could happen. We have had a very fun conversation. We're going to start wrapping this up. Michael, we're going to do Rich. Rich, what are your final thoughts and comments today, since you're the guest of honor?
Oh, guest of honor. That's a lot of pressure. My final thoughts and comments are, there's a lot of really good stuff on Indiegogo, on Kickstarter. Creators are, in my opinion, just moving more towards that crowdfunding model and, working for themselves. And there's a lot of good stuff out there that people are probably just overlooking and not seeing because they're not going out there looking for it. It's not on the stands in front of them on Wednesday afternoon when they go to get their new comics, so they're missing out on some good stuff. And I mean, I've worked on a few projects now with Keith, but Jump is actually my favorite one so far of all the stuff I've read and seen and been involved in. So if people sleep on that project, I think they're missing out. And
hey, here's a question for you. Let me ask you a question, because you're the only person so far that's read Jump. Do you have a theory as to how we're going to keep going into number 2? Has anything like poked you and said, "Oh, I bet you this is going to come into play"?
Well, the only thing that poked me was when you told me how number 2 was going to take place, because you already spoiled it for me. You told me a little while back what was going to happen in general in number 2. But I will say that if people pick up number 1 and when they get to the end of that book, they're going to be like, well, crap. How do they come back from this? It is one of those cliffhanger type. Well, how does the book continue when they see the last couple of pages it'll be a little bit of a shock, I think, to
So,
readers.
Rich, you know the secret sauce thing behind it, so it's a pretty innovative idea, isn't
I've seen the sausage made. Yeah,
You made the sausage.
it?
someone called me the Sausage King of Chicago.
Let's go to Michael. Michael, what are your closing thoughts today?
Please buy my book. Yeah, check it out on Kickstarter, and I think you're gonna like it. I've actually got people who told me they like number one so much that they're getting multiple copies so they can give them to friends.
Keith should be so
So
look at he's just rubbing this into Keith. Look at Keith, just rubbing it in. They're
Nah,
buying it for
nah.
friends. They're buying it for friends. Thing.
Wish I had friends.
Come on, Michael. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, and like yeah, Keith knows the social media makes it so tough to spread the word. So, we need all the help we can get. So yeah, if anybody can share the links when they see something come up on Twitter, I refuse to call it X, or Instagram or Facebook, do us a favor and spread the word, spread the links, help us out.
Keith, you get the last word.
The last word for me, I love making comics. I really do. I love working with people that I like, and I'm lucky to be able to do that on these projects. I think The Jump, or I should just say Jump, because there is another book called The Jump. I think Jump is one of the best things that I've done so far. I think anyone that reads that book is going to be pulled into the world that we're creating, and they're going to be intrigued as to how we can keep going. I like the Invisible analogy. I've never read Invincible, but it's very popular. So, if people want to compare mine to that in a favorable way, God bless you.
So,
But
Rich,
come along for
the
the
check will be in the mail, Rich, for you for that
Yeah.
little plug.
I
He's
want some of
gotta-
that Kirkman money. I want some of that Kirkman money.
I owe Rich money anyway, so I'll throw a little extra in. But and like Mike said, if you don't want to back it, share it. Like tell a friend or share a link on your social media. It's the algorithms make it so hard. And the analogy or the story I've said a couple of times is I don't even know how the algorithm knows what I'm doing. But if I just post something on my Instagram, I'm not a viral sensation, but I have, a good number of followers. And maybe like 60% of my followers will see that post. If I post something for a Kickstarter, maybe 20% of my followers will see that post. Like anything that I want to direct out of Instagram to a different website or, I want people to pay attention to, they just throttle it. And I don't even understand how they know what to throttle, but it's very frustrating. And if people want to help us out by backing and or sharing, we really can't make these books without people knowing about them.
Rich Stahnke, Michael Katz, Keith Champagne, thank you for joining me. I will have all this information in the show notes. This has been a very fun, enjoyable taping tonight. Thank you all for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.